England in 1066 was a kingdom on the edge of chaos. A king had died without an heir, nobles circled like wolves, and across the sea a man they called a bastard, prepared to risk everything. His name was William, Duke of Normandy. To some, he was a ruthless invader. To others, a chosen king. One battle would decide the fate of England, and one man would be remembered forever as William the Conqueror, the Norman Lion. But his road to power was drenched in blood, betrayal, and ambition. England in the early 11th century was a land of kings and kinship, of proud warriors and unyielding loyalty. The Saxons ruled, and their kings, crowned in the grand stone abbeys, were expected to protect their people with a mix of honor and might. Life in this England was both simple and brutal. Villages dotted the green hills, markets thrived on barter, and the clergy held sway over morality and law. The people were hardy, their lives tied to the rhythm of the seasons and the sword. Yet, the kingdom was far from stable. The memory of Viking invasions lingered like a shadow. King Edward the Confessor, a ruler respected for his piety, had ascended the throne in 1042, but his reign brought both hope and uncertainty. Edward was a man of the church, often more concerned with prayer than with matters of war or politics. His decisions, while guided by faith, sometimes left the kingdom vulnerable to ambition and intrigue. Among the nobles, power was a currency measured not just in land, but in alliances, marriages, and the ability to command loyalty. Harold Godwinson, a seasoned warrior and the most powerful earl in England, held sway over vast territories and men. The Saxon aristocracy, loyal yet wary, balanced between the king's authority and their own ambitions. But the cracks in the kingdom were becoming clear. Rumors of claims to the throne from distant lands, across the Channel in Normandy, were whispered in shadowed halls. The Normans were descendants of Vikings who had settled in northern France, and they were known for both cunning and ruthlessness. William, Duke of Normandy, was their rising star, a man of vision, strategy, and ambition. Yet, at this time, he was a figure distant from the green fields of England, a name on the lips of courtiers, but not yet a force to be reckoned with by the everyday Saxon. Every village and town held its own story of survival, of loyalty tested by famine, flood, and feuds. And in this England, on the edge of a monumental shift, the people remained blissfully unaware that the fate of their nation would soon be decided by a single battle, one that would etch itself into the annals of history. England was about to face a challenge unlike any it had seen, a storm of steel and ambition, led by a man whose determination would change the very fabric of the kingdom. As the autumn leaves fell in 1066, the air carried an unease that the common folk could not name. Traders, shepherds, and nobles alike sensed that England was fragile, like a vessel drifting on uncertain seas. And across the Channel, William of Normandy, a man both feared and respected, prepared for a journey that would not just claim a crown, but reshape the destiny of an entire land. William's journey to the English crown was neither simple nor certain. Born in 1028 as the illegitimate son of Robert I, Duke of Normandy, William's early life was marked by danger and doubt. Bastards in medieval Europe were often denied inheritance, scorned by peers and vulnerable to rivals. Yet, William's mother, Herlava, ensured that her son knew ambition could be forged into power, and William grew up learning that cunning and courage could outweigh bloodline. By the time he inherited the duchy in 1035, William was just a boy. Normandy was a fractured land, rife with noble families eager to challenge a weak duke. William survived assassination attempts, rebellions, and betrayals, forging alliances with both fear and diplomacy. His youth was spent in constant vigilance, each day a lesson in patience, strategy, and leadership. Those early trials honed a mind capable of plotting with the precision of a chess master and a will unyielding even in the face of death. William's claim to the English throne came from a promise, a secret assurance from Edward the Confessor. Edward had no heir, and according to William, the king had named him as the rightful successor to England. This claim was fragile, as promises in royal courts were often more verbal than binding, And Harold Godwinson, Edward's trusted earl, had powerful supporters of his own. To secure his position, William began preparing for conquest with methodical precision. He assembled a fleet, trained a disciplined army, and rallied his vassals with promises of glory and land. Normandy, once a region of internal strife, became a well-oiled machine ready for war. William understood that victory would not come from mere luck. It would demand strategy, timing, and ruthless execution. When Edward finally died in January 1066, the vacuum of power ignited the flames of conflict. Harold Godwinson seized the crown, claiming legitimacy through the Witenagemot, the Council of Nobles. To William, this was not just a slight, it was a challenge, a call to arms. Across the Channel, he rallied his knights and sharpened their swords. Normandy, united under his command, would sail to claim a throne promised yet denied. Every step William took was calculated. He wrote letters to kings, secured alliances with the papacy, and framed his invasion not merely as conquest, but as a mission sanctioned by God. His claim, though contested, carried with it the weight of divine approval, a persuasive argument in a world where faith and politics were inseparable. By summer, William was ready. His fleet of hundreds of ships, carrying thousands of men and horses, became a symbol of inevitability. The Norman Lion, as he would later be called, was poised to strike at the heart of England. And far across the North Sea, Harold Godwinson prepared his own defenses, unaware that the coming clash would not just be a battle for the throne, but a turning point in history itself. The dawn of October 14, 1066, was heavy with fog and tension. On the rolling hills near Hastings, two worlds faced each other. To the north stood Harold Godwinson and his wary Saxon warriors, men who had just marched hundreds of miles after defeating a Viking invasion at Stamford Bridge weeks earlier. Their bodies were bruised, their spirits stretched thin, but their loyalty to England was unwavering. Across the field, William of Normandy's army gathered, a disciplined force of knights, archers, and infantry, their banners of gold and blue fluttering in the wind. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for steel to meet steel. Harold's men formed their famous shield wall, a human fortress of overlapping shields, spears braced, and eyes fixed. Behind them, their king stood tall, his golden standard flying, symbolizing defiance and duty. The Saxons fought not just for a crown, but for the survival of their homeland. William, watching from his horse, knew this would be no ordinary clash. He had crossed the Channel with everything at stake. If he lost, he would be remembered as a reckless invader. If he won, he would be king. The battle began with Norman archers unleashing a storm of arrows. The sky darkened for a moment as shafts rained down, but the Saxon shield wall held firm, wood and iron absorbing the deadly hail. Next came the infantry, pushing forward with swords and axes, yet still the Saxons did not break. Their wall was a mountain of flesh and resolve, immovable and unshaken. For hours, the field was filled with the sound of clashing metal, cries of the dying, and the thunder of hooves. William realized brute force would not shatter this wall. He needed cunning. So he ordered a feigned retreat, a dangerous gamble. Norman cavalry turned and fled downhill, pretending to flee in panic. The Saxons, believing victory was at hand, broke formation and pursued. This was their fatal mistake. The moment they left the safety of their wall, Norman knights wheeled around, surrounding them with ruthless precision. What had been Saxon strength now became their weakness. The battle dragged on through the day. Blood soaked the earth, and the hill near Hastings became a graveyard. The decisive moment came when Harold himself, standing defiantly at the center, was struck by an arrow. Legend says in the eye. He collapsed, and with him fell the Saxon hope. Chaos erupted, soldiers fled, and William pressed forward with relentless fury. By nightfall, the Saxons were broken. The English crown, once steady in Saxon hands, now lay within William's grasp. The Battle of Hastings was more than just a clash of armies. It was a clash of destinies. One man's ambition met another man's loyalty, and history tilted in favor of the Norman Lion. Though William won at Hastings, England did not bow quietly. The Saxons were proud, their spirit unbroken even in defeat. Across the countryside, whispers of rebellion turned into fire. Nobles who had once sworn loyalty to Harold now plotted in shadows. Villagers resisted Norman soldiers, striking from forests and marshes before vanishing again. The land William thought he had conquered was alive with defiance. In the north, the rebellions burned fiercest. York rose in revolt, Saxons joining forces with Viking allies to challenge Norman rule. William responded with merciless force. He marched his armies north and unleashed what history remembers as the Harrying of the North. Villages were torched, crops destroyed, and thousands left to starve. It was not just punishment, it was a message. William would not tolerate betrayal. To defy him was to invite ruin. But rebellion was not limited to the north. In the west, in the fens of Ely, Hereward the Wake led guerrilla resistance, striking like a phantom and disappearing into the marshes. Even the church, the heart of Saxon society, sometimes hesitated in its support, torn between fear of Norman wrath and loyalty to its people. Every castle William built was not just a fortress, but a warning the Normans were here to stay. And yet, William understood conquest could not survive on fear alone. He rewarded loyal nobles with lands, blending Norman and Saxon interests. He integrated Norman law and order into English governance, slowly binding the two cultures. Still, many Saxons felt betrayed, not only by William, but by their own leaders who chose survival over defiance. For them, England's soul had been sold. The rebellions revealed the truth of conquest. Victory in battle does not guarantee peace. Betrayal lingered in every shadow, and William's crown, though glittering, was heavy with unrest. In the end, William's reign was not remembered only for the blood of Hastings or the fires of rebellion. It was remembered for transformation. The Norman lion reshaped England in ways no Saxon king had before. Stone castles rose across the land, symbols of Norman strength and permanence. The Tower of London, still standing today, was among his greatest legacies. A fortress, a prison, and a reminder of power carved in stone. Norman architecture spread, bringing towering cathedrals and monasteries that lifted eyes toward heaven and anchored faith in new forms of grandeur. The feudal system replaced the Saxon way of rule. Land was no longer simply inherited or shared. It was granted by the king in return for loyalty and service. This system gave William absolute control, making every noble dependent on him. The Domesday Book, his grand survey of England's wealth and land, showed not only his hunger for order, but his vision of governance far ahead of his time. Language, too, bore his mark. French words merged with Saxon tongue, giving birth to the English we know today. A blend of conqueror and conquered. In courts and halls, in villages and markets, England's culture became a hybrid, forged by steel but softened by time. William's personal legacy was complex. To Normans, he was the hero who seized a kingdom. To Saxons, he was the foreigner who broke their world. Yet no one could deny his impact. He turned England from an isolated kingdom into part of a larger European order. His dynasty, the Normans, would rule for generations, leaving echoes that shaped law, language, and culture for centuries. From a boy branded illegitimate to the king who conquered England, William's journey was extraordinary. His story proves that history is often written not by the comfortable, but by those who dared to risk everything. The Norman lion had roared, and the world listened. From an illegitimate boy in Normandy to the king who reshaped England, William's journey was carved by ambition, strategy, and relentless will. He won not just a crown, but the power to change a nation's destiny. The castles he built still rise against the sky, the laws he wrote still echo in history, and the language he left behind still shapes every word we speak. To the Saxons, he was a conqueror. To the Normans, he was a hero. But to the world, he became something greater. William the Conqueror, the Norman lion whose roar still echoes through the centuries.